All right, I'm going to officially call this meeting to begin. So thank you all so much for coming. Much appreciated. August 16th, our another meeting of the council. Just so you know, I did change locations. As I'm sure you remember, in my office, my screen kept going black and my lights kept going off. So hopefully today I will not be popping up and down to activate my lights, and hopefully my screens will stay consistent. Appreciate your understanding through the last ones and your patience. So as I shared last time, I am the interim director of the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success. I welcome all of you to our meeting. As you know, we show this slide at every meeting. This is just building that learning culture of keeping yourself on mute unless you are actively speaking, keeping your video on as much as possible when that's allowed. I know some people have been coming as they've been driving. So we appreciate that. Just please make sure that you are being safe, and use the chat for questions, the raising hand, and the emotion icons. I would like to ask Leslie to do the roll call, and then we'll do the consent to accept the minutes. Leslie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, Dr. Maureen Burmett.
Here.
Dr. Michael Coyne.
Hi, everyone.
Dr. Margie Gillis. Kimberly Healy.
Yes, I'm here.
Steven Hernandez.
Hi, Leslie. Steve Hernandez here.
Dr. Melissa Jenkins. Christina Kinsberry. Stephanie Lockhart. Francis Rabinowitz. Lisa Thomas.
I am here.
Christina Tights.
Good afternoon.
Roll call is completed.
Thank you, Leslie. I would like to pause from our agenda to introduce a most important viewer who just jumped into our meeting. This would be Senator Miller. I know I'm putting you on the spot, Senator Miller, but if at some point you would like to speak, we would be greatly honored by that, as we're honored by your presence here today.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't get my camera to work for some reason. So sorry about, there it is. Can you see me? Am I visible?
Perfectly. Yes, perfect.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Melissa, for allowing me to say a few words. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining the council. I'm really excited about the work that we're about to do, and we've been able to showcase our work thus far. Just this part of it, with the Hunt Institute, and so other states are interested in the work that we're doing. But I'm really excited, and I just want to say thank you, because I know none of you get paid for this, and you're doing it because you care about reading in our state. So again, thank you all, and I'm just excited about the end product that we're going to end up with at the end of all of this. Once we get the reading center up and running. But Melissa, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you for bringing us this far. It's because of you and your team that we've been able to do as much as we have, as well as our core team, and Steve Hernandez and the CK3LI team. So again, thank you all. And again, I'm excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about what's happening, because it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. I know we have a lot more work to do. So thank you, Melissa.
Oh, no, thank you so much. And then as you're thanking people, I want to thank the commissioner for instilling the trust in me to be the interim director. So shout out to her as well. And it's a perfect meeting for you to be joining today. We are going to be reviewing the legislation and many of the initiatives. Dr. Coyne is going to be speaking and Stephen Hernandez is going to be speaking. So a lot of this work you are more than familiar with. And it's just once again exciting to have you here today. So I shall move on. Just as a reminder, the purpose of the council is to provide consultation to the director. So as I'm interim, you'll continue to provide consultation to me. We have developed some goals that we drafted, and today we're going to be fine-tuning one of them at the end of our meeting. We'll be meeting at least every 2 months, which we have been doing. Once again, consulting with me and supporting the work of the center. I just wanted to give an update. As you know, we always save time to do updates. One of the updates has to do with the Reading Core process. As you know, this was an open review process, May 4th to the 25th. We did have 53 submissions from various districts as well as publishers. We had 16 amazing team members who were reviewing the 53 submissions at least twice. So we are now in that process of really ensuring the data and are accurate and that we're analyzing and auditing that. So we're hoping soon to be moving forward some programs to all of you so that you can give your consultation and final review and then sharing with all the districts. So that won't be happening today, but I did just want to loop you into the process as we continue to be in this analyzing stage. Today, we are going to be doing presentations, and the reason we're doing these presentations is at our last meeting, this bubbled up as people wanted to know what is the history, what has been going on, what initiatives have been going on, and then what could we be using in our work to be moving our work forward. At the last meeting, there was a variety that were mentioned, and I'm just going to go back to my notes to review. One on the 2Gen presentation, one on the Connecticut Literacy Model presentation. Fran asked for Ready CT, so I'll be doing that in the future. One on the CSDE Next Generation Accountability System, which I'm also going to be scheduling for the future with Ajit. And then the ask, I believe, from Dr. Jenkins regarding the curriculum and assessment work that the State Department of Education has been doing. So at our next meeting in September, after we've all reviewed and approved the dates, I will be asking Dr. Joanne White, to come and present on the current model curricula work as well as the assessment work. But for today, what we'll do is I'll start by just doing a global science of reading history in Connecticut. And of course, I ask those who are presenting today to feel free to jump in, as well as Senator Miller. And then we'll be moving to our 2-generational presentation from Stephen Hernandez, who every time I feel like I turn around, his commission is adding to the title of the commission. So I hope I caught everybody here with women, children, seniors, equity, and opportunity. And then Dr. Michael Coyne. So we're honored to have you both here today. As you can see, Dr. Coyne wears many hats, and I will have them introduce themselves as we move on. I thought I would start with the history of the legislation, and then that would transition to our next speakers. Before I jump in, are there any, we didn't do the minutes, did we? I got so excited by having Senator Miller here, I neglected to ask for consent of minutes. So I'm just going to ask to take one step back. Were there any questions, edits, etc., regarding the minutes from our last meeting?
No, they were straightforward to me.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move forward with a consent. Okay. Anybody not consent? All right, thank you so much. Leslie, if we can put that down as we have all consented. All right. So moving on to the science of reading, the history in Connecticut. Connecticut has a very, very rich reading history. In 1997, it was nationally, the Congress convened the National Reading Panel. Connecticut was one of the only states that then convened their own early reading success panel. So this was a group of educators and leaders who got together and then released a report. So this was groundbreaking, very exciting, and once again, other states were not doing it at that time. What happened from this, and many of you may remember this, was the blueprint. The State Department of Education released a blueprint that really solidified the research and the evidence that was so important for the teaching of literacy. In 2001, there was an initiative to bring reading first into the state, and this assisted many districts in really moving their students forward. In 2007, Beyond the Blueprint came out for those grades that were above grade 3 and really getting into content literacy and how can we take these skills that are so necessary and put them across all the contents. Now, at this time, I was in various roles, teacher of second grade, teacher in middle school, and I personally found these very helpful. And I know many of my colleagues did as well. Then there was Connecticut's framework for RTI. I'm sure many of you remember that work too. It was with the Connecticut State Department of Education, as well as with CERC. And it's so interesting, as I go through these dates, so much of it is tied to my children and how old they were, and was I pregnant or not pregnant, or what was going on in my life at the time. So I remember going to so many trainings in various stages. But anyways, moving to the 2010 assessment pilot, that was working with Margie Gillis and Dr. Coyne and many other amazing people. And once again, I know I'm going quickly, but our next two speakers will be diving deeper into this. The 2016 2Gen initiative, that's the one that Stephen Hernandez will be talking about, leading us up to right now. Right now, 2021, this is the Right to Read Act, as we fondly call it, which is the longer Section 395, etc., that did put in place the director position as well as the center and all of you in the council. So fast and furious, but I just wanted you to see that there is a flow here, that Connecticut has been very much in the forefront for reading and advocacy and caring about literacy and students, and really propelling students forward. Now, those who were very connected to this work, I'm going to show the next slide with the legislation, and I'm going to ask Senator Miller, Dr. Gillis, Stephen Hernandez, Dr. Coyne, if any of you feel like I have missed anything. Like I said, I know, Dr. Coyne, you are going deeper into much of this legislation. But for those of you in the audience, here are just some of the literacy legislation that's been put in place over the years. The legislation spans across various supports. Some are for our alliance districts, some include fiscal incentives, some are around professional learning, some are reading, setting up individual plans for students, assessments, etc. So once again, this is just kind of to dip our toe in to get ready for our next speakers. But before I transition over to Stephen, Dr. Gillis, Senator Miller, anything you want to add? And I know I'm cold calling you, Dr. Gillis, apologies.
Not a problem, Melissa. Dr. Hickey. No, you did a great recap. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm fine
All right.
as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, then I'm going to switch over to Dr. Coyne. It's all you, and I'm going to mute, and you just tell me when you want me to move the slide.
Great, thanks so much. Can you all hear me? All right, great.
Somehow you just automatically muted. So we went from can you hear me to nothing.
How about now? Now
Perfect.
am I back? That happens to me on Teams sometimes. So yeah, just started to say that I'm really pleased that Dr. Hickey gave me the opportunity to talk about Connecticut's K-3 Literacy Initiative, CK3LI, which is also known as the Connecticut Literacy Model, CTLM. And as I talk, I'll probably go back and forth between those two. I've sort of maybe used those interchangeably, but as Dr. Hickey was saying, this is an initiative that started 10 years ago to support Connecticut schools and districts increase reading achievement by helping them establish and sustain effective school-wide reading practices and systems. And I think that the success of CK3LI, or Connecticut's literacy model, directly informed the writing of the Right to Read Act. And one of the primary goals of the new Center on Literacy Research and Success is to really work to expand and scale up Connecticut's literacy model so that the supports associated with it are available to more schools and districts across Connecticut. I'll also say that I've been a part of this initiative from the beginning, and it's been an incredibly rewarding experience for me to be part of this really amazing partnership. Melissa, you can go on to the next slide. So as Melissa was saying, this initiative came out of Public Act 12-116 that was in 2012 that talked about the Department of Education developing an intensive reading intervention strategy to be used by schools to really address achievement gaps at schools and to ensure that all students are reading proficiently by grade 3. So this was the part of one of the history of the work on reading in Connecticut in 2012. We can go on to the next one. And so as the result, of this legislation, in response to it, a really unique and committed collaborative partnership was formed to carry out this act. And this is a partnership that still exists today. And so, I mean, I think the partnership is really anchored to the vision and the leadership of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus of the Connecticut General Assembly. And, you know, this group has already seen the passion and commitment of Senator Pat Miller, who continues to be a champion of this work and who I think we all need to thank for her, you know, tireless energy and really advocating for reading success across the state. This partnership is really also based on the commitment and the investment of the Connecticut State Department of Education, including Dr. Hickey, who's Connecticut's Director of Literacy, and also I mentioned Joanne White, the state's literacy consultant. The partnership's also drawn on the expertise of the University of Connecticut and the MEAG School of Education at UConn, and also bringing on partners that have a depth of experience and capacity, like the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity and Opportunity, led by Stephen Hernandez, and then really expert regional literacy organizations, including Literacy How and Dr. Margie Gillis, and Hill for Literacy, Dr. Darcy Burns. So this has been, in my experience, a really unique partnership that spans multiple agencies and organizations and branches of Connecticut's government. So it really is unique in my experience to see these partners come together all with the same goal for improving reading success in Connecticut. Okay, the next one. So as we were thinking, as this initiative was launching and thinking about you know, developing this Connecticut literacy model or this K-3 literacy initiative, the development was formed by a number of important principles. One, of course, is that teaching reading is essential, and it, you know, it may be the most important thing we do in schools and should be one of our very top priorities. Also, at the same time, I think teaching reading is really urgent, and we have to think about it with a sense of urgency. We know it's absolutely critical that students get off to a good start in reading, so we wanted to think about thinking about teaching reading proactively and preventatively, really focusing on teaching reading early and effectively so that we don't have to sort of catch kids up later on, that we can get all kids off to a really good start in reading. We also have always been committed to the idea that teaching reading should be informed by the science of reading and should rely on effective evidence-based practices in assessment, instruction, and intervention, in which we're really coming from a good place there. I think we know more about beginning reading than any other area of education. We have a really large, robust scientific research base that provides us with solid, reliable, and actionable evidence about reading development, reading difficulties, and most importantly, effective strategies for teaching all students to read. And we believe that we owe it to schools and teachers to provide them with tools and strategies that really work. But at the same time, we also know that teaching reading is really hard and really complex, probably a lot more difficult than most of us realize. Louisa most famously wrote that teaching reading is rocket science. And also, I think beyond that, it's extremely challenging for schools to take what we know from science and research and establish it in schools. It really involves the coordination of alignment and of all these different kind of practices that also are meeting the unique priorities and goals of individual schools. So this initiative also really wanted to think about teaching reading from a kind of systems instructors perspective, to really think about helping schools develop systems and structures to support teachers and coordinate effective practices. This work was also really informed by tiered systems of support. MTSS, or sometimes we talk about it as response to intervention, or SRBI. But the idea is that not every student requires the same kind of instruction, and that one size doesn't fit all. So we need to align the level and type of reading support to each individual student's needs. Next slide. So this is the primary components of Connecticut's literacy model. And I think one of the most important things about Connecticut's reading model is that it's not a product or a program. Instead, it's really is a framework. It's a framework for effective and validated practices for teaching and assessing reading. So some of these components include identifying reading as a school's top priority, developing a comprehensive school-wide reading plan, ensuring that there is strong distributed literacy leadership, starting with the principal and including a representative school leadership team. Also delivering high-quality classroom reading instruction informed by the science of reading to all students in all classrooms. Providing intensive evidence-based supplemental reading interventions for students that need extra support. Identifying assessments that let teachers know if their instruction is working and if students are learning. A really important component is supporting teachers through ongoing coaching and targeted professional development that is nimble and responsive to their needs. And finally, nurturing strong parent and family engagement so that families feel empowered to be equal partners in reading success. So I think the thing about this is none of these practices are new or different. We know that all these things are important and to change reading outcomes. But what I think has been different over the years about this initiative is the focus on coordinating and aligning these practices in a systematic way to really work with schools to develop a coherent and focused school-wide vision for mobilizing resources to support reading success. In a sense, really, literally developing an individualized reading plan for each student in each school within a tiered system of support. So Connecticut's reading model is not just about adopting a program or implementing an intervention. Those things are really important, but it's also about changing the system, changing how schools teach reading at a systems level.
And pardon me 1 second, I would just like the council to think about, as I said earlier, one of the reasons we are inviting Mike and Stephen to speak today is to assist us, especially with that last goal that we had discussed of developing that birth to 12 reading success strategy. So as they're speaking today, if there are elements that you want to explore deeper, that you think really resonate with you, that you think we should be putting into this strategy, please, we can talk about it after and, like I said, see how this could really help us with our work. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Melissa. And also, I'm happy to talk more about any of these things. I'm just going through the slides right now. But also, Melissa, let me know if questions come up during the presentation. It's kind of hard to check the chat in. So just interrupt me if there's questions that come up.
Absolutely.
So then, next slide. So during the first 2 years of the initiative, we really focused on working intensely with 5 schools across 5 different alliance districts as part of a pilot so that we could really refine the model and rigorously evaluate its effectiveness. And I also want to highlight some of the intensive supports and resources that this initiative provided to schools and teachers during the pilot to help them build the model in their schools. So some of these supports and resources included access to a cadre of experienced expert coaches and trainers that work directly with schools on a wide range of reading needs. So really providing the best experts in reading to work directly with teachers and leadership teams in schools to build out their school literacy plan and implement it effectively. Also helping schools complete a school-wide reading inventory to support the development of specific school reading plans. Not every school is at the same place and often has different priorities and different strengths and needs. So really understanding where schools are and kind of implementing tiered supports for reading. Helping schools to adopt and implement effective practices. So these are things like school-wide assessment systems, a comprehensive core reading program, and evidence-based supplemental interventions. Professional development for teachers on both the science of reading and on implementing specific practices and programs that might be unique to their schools. Something that's really important is providing really strong ongoing leadership team training, leadership teams that include the principal and also a representative school team that includes teachers and specialists and parents to really support this idea of building distributed leadership and to build internal capacity. It also included support to hire internal literacy coaches and interventionists. One of the things that we've learned is that having dedicated and trained reading professionals in each school is really key to kind of building and sustaining this kind of a reading model. And again, a family engagement curriculum that empowers families. So next slide.
And then just as I'm advancing, also just a little plug. So prior to coming to the state, I was in the Hartford Public Schools. I was the director of humanities there for K-12. And one of the schools in the pilot, being led by Dr. Monica Brazzi at Burns, actually through this work, the triangle was flipped. So originally when this started, we had more students who were below grade level. However, doing this work and being engaged in the pilot, the triangle really did start flipping and more students were coming up as grade level and approaching grade level. So that was pretty amazing work that was going on.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. That actually leads really well into this too. So, I mean, one of the things that we found in this pilot really is that Connecticut's literacy model works. So outcome data consistently showed that students experienced greater growth in early literacy skills across grade levels and across literacy measures when their school implemented Connecticut's reading model. And that we also saw that these benefits continued to increase over time. So 2 years was better than 1 year, 3 years was better than 2 years. And a couple of examples, we found in some of our analysis that pilot schools more than doubled the number of students meeting important grade level literacy goals, and then also more than halved the number of students at significant risk for reading failure. So we did see the evidence, like Melissa was saying, of schools really being able to kind of shift their outcomes so that more students were meeting grade level goals and less students were at risk. And I think I'm a kind of researcher, so I geek out on this kind of stuff. But one of the exciting things that we were able to do that doesn't happen very often is that we don't just have descriptive or correlational data from these studies. We've been able to evaluate Connecticut's reading model using rigorous research designs that allow us to attribute changes in student reading achievement directly to schools implementing Connecticut's reading model. And this is important because these evaluation studies meet levels of standards for rigor and effectiveness required by the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. And in my experience, this is extremely rare for a state to have such robust and rigorous research data on the effectiveness of a state initiative. And in fact, as Senator Miller was saying, other states across the country have looked to our research evidence on the Connecticut reading model to develop and inform their own state reading improvement efforts. And because many of the folks that are on this call or other people at the state level, like Connecticut really truly has been a national leader in this kind of statewide reading reform. So next slide. And so after completing the pilot, and having this kind of compelling and trustworthy evidence that this model worked, the goal of the initiative really shifted towards providing access and supports to more schools and districts across Connecticut. And so in a sense, CK3LI has really transformed from a targeted pilot working with 5 schools and 5 districts to an established collaborative partnership that has supported more than 75 schools across 15 districts. And during that time, this initiative has really built the capacity and expertise and flexibility to work with schools and districts across Connecticut on a number of different reading initiatives, and to directly support the commissioner's goals, priorities, and vision for improving student reading achievement in Connecticut. We've built lots of really effective tools and systems and professional development and training and coaching protocols. And I guess one thing I'll say is, although this initiative has really continued to be able to provide valuable support and resources to these schools and districts that we're working with, we were also adding schools and districts while at the same time the initiative's budget stayed the same or decreased. So in a sense, the initiative wasn't really able to provide the same level of intensity or scope of supports as it did in some of the earlier years. But this is until the sort of vision and investment of the Right to Read Act. So next slide. So to me, what's incredibly exciting is that the Right to Read Act, was really informed by the success of Connecticut's reading model, and then also with the vision and the desire to try to leverage funds to scale up and expand this model. So some of the language from the Act is specifically talks about, again, the development and the establishment of the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success. And one of the responsibilities of the center is the implementation of a coordinated statewide reading plan. And again, I think to me that means that one of the things that we can really draw on is the work of developing and evaluating the kind of flexible but highly informed Connecticut reading model to be able to scale that up or expand that to access to more schools and districts. Another piece of the legislation talks about the center developing an intensive reading intervention strategy, which is almost the same wording as the 2012 bill, which again, really doubling down again on this support for our schools to be able to implement effective practices, build systems and structures to ensure that all students are reading proficiently by grade 3. And then the exciting piece that we're going to be able to talk about next is how the legislation also expands the thinking about this to pre-K-12 and also to 2Gen. So that it's kind of going beyond just the original K-3 focus to a more comprehensive model and framework for thinking about the wide range of learners and aligning and coordinating different initiatives. There's also a website that goes into a little bit more detail about some of the work of this partnership. And I'm also happy to answer questions or talk more about any of this. I guess finally, the last thing I'll say is that, I've been involved in a lot of work and a lot of studies, but I think my involvement in this initiative has probably been one of the most meaningful and rewarding and important professional activities that I've been part of. And I really believe that the Connecticut's work and investment over the years to improve reading outcomes and close the achievement and opportunity gaps has been really one of the more serious comprehensive and forward thinking of any state. And I really think that this Right to Read Act and the new Literacy Center give us the opportunity to really take this work to the next level and to really leverage significant funding and commitment to make a meaningful and lasting difference in the reading outcomes of students across the state. So I just feel really privileged and lucky to have been part of that work and to be part of this group that's moving that work forward. So just wanted to end with that.
Thank you so much. Mike, we appreciate your time and everything that you've been sharing. And I see Senator Miller's hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike, for your work, because we definitely wouldn't have been able to do this without you and Dr. Wasugai. If it wasn't for the two of you coming on board, we wouldn't be able to do this work. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, Mike, and you talked about how we continued to work although our funding was being reduced. And I want to thank SDE for filling in the gap, because although our funding was reduced, SDE found monies from their budget to make sure that the work continues. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah, thank you. The SDE has been an incredible partner on this work from the very beginning. And without the support of the SDE, folks like Dr. Hickey and Joanne White, they've been leaders and champions of this work since the very beginning also. So yeah, I mean, we felt, I think, lucky to have the funding that we did, and we're able to do a tremendous amount with that amount of funding. And it's even more exciting to think about this new investment and how that can help the state take the next step as well.
Is this where I mentioned the yearly yard sale and the cookie bake, or no?
Well, I can tell you, to look at where we were in the beginning to where we are now, I'm doing cartwheels. So with the funding that we're receiving. So I'm really excited about where we're headed.
I'd also like to just chime in too, because Senator Miller is very modest, but she's been sought after as a leader in doing this transformational work by other states in the country. And, this work is not easy, as we know, and we've been at it for a long time. And it's really the partnerships that I think have made it so strong. The partnership with SDE, the partnership with UConn, the partnership with the commission. I mean, all of these partnerships contribute and strengthen the integrity of the model. And I just want to acknowledge your leadership, Senator Miller, and the fact that many other policymakers across the country recognize what you and your colleagues have done at the policy level.
Thank you. But it's a team effort, so we couldn't have done it without you. Were you just bringing in Massachusetts and the partners, all the people that you've brought in from around the states, how we showcase the work with our reading forums, thanks to the commission and Dr. Coyne being able to show the work that we've done. So I'm just grateful for the partnership, and that's what it's all about. I mean, I was in North Carolina recently, and it was about partnerships. We can't do it alone. The policymakers can't do it without the experts on the ground. So again, thank you.
And this is where I'll jump on the thank you train and thank all of you in the districts and the schools who have been doing this work, and to Fran as well in her leadership role. So, there's so many of you, not only on the council, but also out in the audience, who have participated in this work like it, and we're seeing student growth as a result. So thank you so much. Are there any questions for Dr. Coyne about the work that he shared? Anything that resonated with any of you as something that we could be thinking about, including in the strategy that we will be developing? Dr. Brummett.
Thank you so much. I was on the PowerPoint a couple slides ago, you mentioned, I believe it was a K-3 literacy, K-3 reading. It talked about a study that was done that districts that used a certain approach or K-3 literacy guidance had better results. Here it is. Is that available on the State Department of Ed? I just was kind of doing a little search into while we were talking for that document. Just if you could shed a little light on what's contained in that, or where I could get my hands on it.
Your computer slipped into mute again.
Thanks for blaming the computer and not me, Melissa. That's always nice. If you go to the link of the website that's shared on the last slide, on that website it says our research. So that tab will give you more information. about that. And there's probably some updates since then too. So I'm happy to send some of these studies that are published. Some of them are still under review, so I can send the commission some of the published studies and overviews of the research findings that came out of this initiative.
Thank you. And so this was something that UConn studied.
Well, it was UConn studied it, but was kind of studied as part of the partnership. So, so it was basically evaluating the initiative that was, the partnership between the legislature and the State Department of Education and the Literacy How and Help for Literacy. So basically, the evaluation of the state initiative we were able to design evaluation studies to be particularly more rigorous than typical, and so some of those kind of met standards for rigor where we're able to publish some of the results in academic journals.
Thank you very much. That would be helpful information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great.
And it actually supports two of our goals then. The first one is to review, research, and analyze successful birth to 12 evidence-based literacy strategies. So by sharing that research with us, that's one of our goals of researching, as well as assisting us in developing this strategy. So thank you so much. Any other questions, comments, thoughts before we switch over to Stephen? Okay. All right, Stephen, it is all you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hickey, and thank you all of you. Mike, especially you through the program that exists today. And really, it's not just the program. It's Connecticut's approach to the literacy and really that key moment in which the child's brain learns to put words on a page. It opens up the possibilities of learning, the possibilities of really absorbing text, absorbing culturally relevant text, absorbing all the wonderful things after you're able to start understanding what those students on the page really mean. It's life-changing. We've seen that finally be able to deliver this in an intentional way with
Stephen, we have lost you. We can see that your lips are moving, but we can't hear what's coming out of your mouth. And when do you want to go out and try to come back in? While he's doing that, I will introduce him. So Stephen, as you can see, is the executive director of the commission, and he has been dedicated to this work for many, many years, using his expertise not only to work with districts and schools and agencies, but also to really support initiatives across the women, children, seniors, equity, and opportunity areas. So while you were going in and out, I just took the opportunity to showcase you a little bit. Seems like you're still having microphone issues.
How's that? Is that a little better?
Yes.
Great. Good.
Is that good, Lisa?
Right.
Is that good?
Good. So I was just saying, I was appreciating the fact of all of the work that has gone into what is really life-changing work in the state of Connecticut. But I really wanted to focus on one element of this work, which has really, I think, compelled us to see the connected dots between some of the work that's happening in other seemingly different spaces and how it impacts the work of literacy and vice versa. And one of those initiatives is our multi-generational success initiative. So many years ago, under, I think it was two federal administrations ago, there began the work of 2Gen. We now know that it's multi-gen, but 2Gen really started as a whole family approach to success. And whether we were talking about educational early childhood attainment, whether we were talking about workforce, ultimately it was about families being able to break multi-generational cycles of poverty through intentional collaboration with families and intentional collaboration and input through all the resources that we have, including those resources around this page. So as that work developed over the years, in the previous administration, it evolved into what was called a whole family approach to jobs. I think we all understood that being able to get families to thrive and children to learn were critical elements of long-term sustainable success. And very, very quietly, around 2010, which is around the time that we started to link these concepts together, the National Institutes of Health released a report that essentially said that a mother's reading skill was the greatest determinant of her child's future academic success, outweighing other factors such as neighborhood and family income. That was such it seemed like a small data point, but it was so incredibly important. And I want us to transport ourselves back to 2010 thinking and what we might have thought when we read that data point. Now, the first thing that might have come to mind is, well, let's help mom. Let's help mom learn to read, and that way we can help kid, right? Not realizing that so much of the work that we have done in this circle over the last few years have taught us that it was much deeper than that. The very reasons that mom hadn't achieved literacy success in her own life were the same reasons and factors the child wasn't achieving and reading and reaching literacy success. So that the evidence of literacy attainment was evidenced multi-generationally, meaning that the work that you're doing is so critical because it has multi-generational impact, sometimes within the same generation. So that was the first echo of how it was that multi-generational success could be captured through this work. As we started expanding 2Gen in the country, really, the various regions had entry points, entry doorways for the work of 2Gen. In Colorado, they focused on dads and the role of fatherhood in multi-generational success. In Tennessee, they started by focusing really on workforce and how it was that companies supported families, especially young families and families that were transitioning into different careers, how they supported multi-generational success that way. But just a few years ago, and it was around the time that we adopted what was the connection between 2Gen and literacy in our own law, Tennessee was doing something very interesting. They very intentionally linked multi-generational success to this reading model, to explicit instruction in literacy, because what they knew was if we're going to ensure that there is multi-generational success, we need to make sure that kids are reading, that they're connected to texts that are interesting to them and empowering. And we can't do that unless we ensure that they have those critical brain skills to be able to decode words on a page. Tennessee led the way. And of course, we were listening because we're part of a community of learning in 2Gen and in early literacy. And in those days, Senator Miller, who's with us today, she introduced part of the evolution of this work at that time, which was to link early literacy, align really reading instruction with the 2-generational initiative established pursuant to our law. So it was really exciting. That's under the reading plan. It exists still in our law. And why is it important? It's important because in order for us to understand the different places in which we are having impact, families have to be engaged. And they have to be engaged not just in a way, hey, mom and dad, this is important for kid, but hey, mom, dad, grandma, this is important for the multi-generational success of your families. And there was another thing that we learned during our work in 2Gen, which I think is instructive to us, which is that 2Gen wasn't just about the family as an actual thing, right? Support the family multi-generationally and you actually build long-term success. But it was also the family as metaphor. Families, we thought, work well, they operate best when they talk to each other, they share resources, they understand the different assets that they each brings to the table, to the dinner table. And what was beautiful about that is that, isn't that a great metaphor for how government should work? Shouldn't agencies be talking to each other, sharing best practices and information? Shouldn't they bring the assets that they know to the table and understand how to best deploy them for multi-generational impact in the state? And what we challenged our institutions to do was, look, we're looking to families and asking a lot of them. We should be asking the same of ourselves. And really, that's what we've done in this space in early literacy. We have begun to understand that the reason that families were missing the opportunities that early literacy brings is because of the way that we had created and perpetuated our systems that were meant to support them. So the work of early literacy is really the work of systems change. How do we address implementation? How do we address tiered models of implementation so that we get to the need right where it is? But also, how do we then build upon that work in the later grades to bring in rich text, to bring in rich context, to bring in exposure to language in a way that's really interesting and exciting, all based on being able to decode those symbols on a page in a way that that helps a child really spark that interest in long-term learning and long-term success. So I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to connect for us here and for the listener the notion of multi-generational best practice, not only because other states are doing it and we've realized the connection, that early connection that we knew between mom's literacy attainment and the child's literacy attainment, but also the role that we are playing in ensuring that young people have as much rich access as we can muster. So I welcome any questions, but again, I encourage you to continue to draw those connections and connect those dots, because there are resources available both locally and nationally from philanthropy and government that are supporting multi-generational success. So as investors, whether you're consider yourselves investors or any investors that may be watching, consider investing in early literacy as part of your overall multi-generational success strategies, because that's where the best bang for your buck is. So thank you all so much. Yes, Lisa.
Thanks for that presentation. You know, in listening to you, I'm mindful of the fact that some of our school districts have family resource centers and some do not. So I retired from the Windsor School District, where for a long time we had a very, very thriving family resource centers, which then lost significant funding and we had to cut back. But when they are thriving, they are truly multi-generational for those birth to 3 kids, with an emphasis on literacy and supporting literacy at home. And hopefully that's something we can look back to as a model and move towards really supporting throughout the state, because I think that's a place to really find success in that birth to 3 age group, and including getting family engagement with our schools, which has been truly a struggle for several years, more than several years now.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for connecting those dots, because I think oftentimes the way that we budget and we fund, we think in silos and we think, well, if we just save a little money here, what impact might it have there? Right? But we know that it does. And that some of the most compelling work that we've done as part of the Connecticut literacy model is actually reaching out to our schools and the little ones and showing the connection between early literacy and family, and that early love of reading that families can help build in young people just through the experience with some of them. If you recall, Margie, we call the juicy words, the civic spaces, all the ways in which family can come together with kids and build that early interest in literacy to buttress the work that we're doing in the schools intentionally. So I thank you, Lisa, for making that connection. I think we need to keep drawing those connections as policy advisors and policy makers. Yes, Fran. I'm sorry, Fran, you've unmuted and now I think we can't hear you.
It must be a Teams thing.
If you go to your device settings, Fran, there's a setting on the far right called microphone, and sometimes you can change your microphones. That worked for me. Great. Any other questions while Fran resolves her? Yes, Senator Miller.
I just wanted to make a point about our initiatives in the family engagement piece is that the family engagement piece wasn't a thought for us, it was intentional. We knew that that had to be a part of our works, and that's the advice that I would give to districts that are looking at this work, is that you have to make that as part of the plan of your initiative, the family engagement piece. And our families were very engaged. We use PLTI to help us with that piece. And so it's looking for those organizations that do the work already and bringing them in as partners. And then it goes back to partnership, right? Partnership. So that was the important piece of our CK3LI was the family engagement, that we made it part of the plan. Thank you, Steve.
I think Fran's trying to get in on her phone. I really want to make sure she has her voice heard.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Perfectly.
I got on a different device. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so sorry I was late. I was at another meeting and lost track of time, but I just wanted to again reinforce what Lisa and Steve said with the family resource centers. As a former longtime career person in Bridgeport and superintendent, I can only tell you that the family resource centers were lifelines. And I remember being in those family resource centers and watching toddlers gain oral language and through music, and the parents being there with them. And also the parents being, as Steve said, connected to tons of resources to help their students with early literacy. So I would just say, I hope that we can continue to connect the dots. We don't need to begin again. We need to have more firm connections to much of the work that we've done. So thank you for bringing that up, Lisa.
Go ahead, Lisa. Did you raise your hand again? Yeah.
I did. And just thinking more about those family resource centers, I know that everybody on this call will be mindful of this, but it's always worth repeating that it's critical to look at the multilingual nature of our communities. I know in our family resource center in the school I was in Windsor, the person who came in over the last few years to direct it made sure to have a lot of Spanish language integrated into that resource center and on the walls. Some of our communities have many more languages that are spoken, and to find ways to make those connections are important as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I don't see any other questions. But thank you all. Thank you all so much for drawing those connections. The more that we do that, I think the more aligned our resourcing will be for this critical skill set and all the wonderful things that come around it, including some of the things that you mentioned. So thank you, Melissa, for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And it was actually the council that requested last time together that we listed a list of different initiatives. So thank you to the council members for bringing everyone forward and bringing forward your questions. I found it very interesting. Many things resonated with me in both of the presentations and the information. I heard you both repeat numerous times about intentional, talking about structures and systems. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What structures and systems? What is intentional? What does that mean? And I don't know who wants to go first. Don't both of you rush at the same time. I'll call on Dr. Coyne first.
Yeah, I think, in some ways I kind of think about it in sort of two levels, right? Like there's a group of individual, I'm thinking about kind of early reading instruction in schools. So there's one level which is effective practices, and there's not just one effective practice, there's a lot of effective practices. So there's effective practices in assessment, there's effective practices in instruction, there's effective practices in interventions, there's different interventions, there's professional development and professional learning. So all those things are kind of exist as individual practices that have evidence of effectiveness for each of those things. And it's great that schools kind of, if they can rely on some of the, research, science of reading to adopt practices that are going to be more likely to be effective with the students that they're working with or with their teachers. But the hard thing is none of those practices by themselves are going to be enough to change reading outcomes. So just adopting an effective reading intervention program or adopting a new school-wide assessment system is going to be enough by itself. What schools have to do is to coordinate and align all these different types of all these practices together in a way that's going to meet their own unique needs and context as a school. So I think one of the ways for me that it's helpful to think about systems and structures is that, how do schools organize themselves to be able to both implement and align and coordinate all these different evidence-based practices that we know are necessary to improve reading. So some of those systems could be, how does the school organize a school leadership team who are the ones that really talk about, all right, how does our assessment system work with our core reading program? And how do we use the assessment data to identify students that are going to receive intervention? So, that's one example of like a system or a structure that's going to help schools be able to coordinate these different practices. Another one is really developing a school-wide plan that's going to meet their own unique needs and priorities. And that might lead them in different directions. So I guess I like to think about it as like, these there's non-negotiable components of effective reading support, but there's no one right answer. There's not one best program or one best assessment or one best way to do professional development. But all those things have to be in place. In a sense, what schools have to do is think about their own unique needs and kind of build these systems and structures and infrastructure to help to coordinate and align all these things. And I think we sometimes give teachers a lot of support on sort of understanding one of those things or understanding, kind of reading in general, but not give them the tools and the systems to how to do this work of creating the systems and structures that support this. I mean, another good example is working on a school schedule or calendar that supports effective reading. So one of the things that this initiative has done is really help schools look at their schedule. And for example, if all schools are teaching, all grades are teaching reading at the same time, and there's interventionists and coaches that are available to push into classrooms to be able to support small group instruction, they can't do that if there's reading instruction happening all at the same time. So some of the schools that have been part of this initiative have staggered reading instruction across the day so they can better take advantage of the reading interventionists and the reading coaches, so that can push in and spend their time providing as much direct service as possible. So those are the kind of things that I think about when I think about systems and structures, which is the tools and the resources and the thinking and the supports to help schools and teachers organize and coordinate these different practices in reading.
Just to add to that, so those are all really important points that you're making, Mike, and I think the most precious commodity, I think, is time. So when and how do you ensure that people can meet to work together? For example, you and I both come from special education, right? And special education is often siloed, but there's such an important piece of providing instruction and looking for early warning signs, right, for kids who are at risk, and they're often left out. So how do we ensure that all those different tiers of instruction are meeting regularly to align what they're providing in terms of instruction?
Yeah, that's really important, Margie, I think.
Senator Miller, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I just had a question. Mike, what role does sustainability play in your work?
Yeah, I think I think building those systems and structures is the primary way to help schools sustain practices over time. Because, you know, if too often schools rely on external training, and, you know, there's changes in leadership that by building this kind of this distributed leadership and structures and systems allow things to sustain over time and to evolve with the needs of the school. So that I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough of is really plan for sustainability and plan for building internal capacity of schools to keep doing things, even if like the principal leaves or the external coach leaves or there's change in funding. So I think that's a really important point, Senator Miller, which is that planning for sustainability is one of the most important pieces of any of this work.
Fran?
So I am so in sync with what Dr. Coyne has just said, and sometimes I really worry because I am a believer that all of these pieces have to be in place. You know, we're doing, you know, training right now for leaders so that they will understand science of reading and they can move that to their teachers. But perhaps my vision is somewhat colored by the fact that I was long term in Bridgeport and I was there when there weren't any resources. And I can tell you that there were 28 children in a first grade classroom, and there were no interventionists, and there were no reading coaches, and there was no ability to do the tutoring. I think as a commission, we have to advocate. I know there's ESSER funding now. I'm not sure where Bridgeport or the large cities are on being able to have the interventionists in place that they need, to have the smaller class size in place. But 2024 is around the corner. And I think one of the jobs of this commission is to continue to advocate for all that Dr. Coyne talked about, because we're not going to solve it by bringing one piece forward. You can have an effective reading program. You can have teachers that really understand how to teach reading. But if they have 28 kids in a classroom and they don't have anyone to help them, that's a real factor in making sure kids can read. And you know, I go off the deep end here and talk about kids reading at the end of first grade because I really do believe that they should be at the end of first grade. And if all of these pieces are not in place, I think that can deprive children of that right to learn to read by the end of first grade. And so I hope this commission would be committed to that sustainability of all of those pieces being in place in order for effective reading instruction to take place for every child in Connecticut.
There's a chat. Someone, oh, Lisa, amen to what Fran says about class size. There are far too many needs in our classroom, especially post-pandemic, to have such high class sizes. Well, and I think this is so great. This is the purpose why we have asked people to come talk today. It is really seeming to be leading us in a certain direction about this whole strategy. We talked before about what does the strategy look like, you know, and I think there's some really important elements that have kind of bubbled up today as a result. I do want to give Stephen time to talk to see if he can share around my question of intentionality, structures, and systems. So thanks so much, Mike. I don't know, Stephen, if you're still, oh, there you go. Oop. Is he still with us? If you're talking, Stephen, we can't hear you again.
Maybe I muted him.
But well, I see his icon moving around, but I don't know. Okay, so while we're waiting, what I'd like to do is I'd like to, and Fran, I'm sorry, you have your hand up. Did you have something else you wanted to say? Okay. Anyone
No.
else before? Okay. Anyone else? You know, I don't want to, I don't want to be missing anyone. I know some people like to listen and sit back and take in information, but two, I don't want to be missing out on giving you an opportunity to speak if you would like to say something. All right, so what I'd like to do now is to show you again what we had discussed as our draft goals. I myself have an idea. I think I want to ask if we should tweak one based on what Stephen did share with us and see what you all are thinking. So here are, I just want to get you all back up here while I'm sharing my screen. Here are what we had established as our draft goals. One thing that I'm thinking about based on the conversation, Stephen mentioned how it's no longer, whoops, sorry. I was trying to edit and I can't edit. This 2-generational initiative now seems like outdated language. And I'm also, I really liked how he said multi-generational success. And I'm wondering if we should tweak the language of this last one to align. Oh, he's back. Stephen, did you want to speak a little bit about the structures, systems, and intentionality words you were using?
Well, thank you, Melissa. And you were just about to touch on that multi-generational success within the same generation. That is really the hallmark of this approach, of the 2-gen approach, as it was originally called. And what all of that means, right? Multi-generational success within the same generation is not just an invitation for families to do better, right? To bootstrap. It's actually an invitation for all of the systems that pro-socially and creatively align to help families attain multi-generational success, that we all look inward and see whether we're actually promoting that or whether we are perpetuating systems of multi-generational poverty. And part of that are the structures that help young people learn and workers succeed. And so on our end, the young people learn part is so critical because we're part of the recipe for multi-generational family success. And so when you ask about the intentionality, that's the intentionality that I'm talking about when it comes to systems work. How do we fund? How do we resource? How do we connect the dots in the way that so many of you have been doing, even in this conversation? And you're right, I think we can be part of that messaging because as you know, if we're just laser focused on K-3 literacy, we're missing the why of the work. And it's the why of the work that should, I'll tell you, I think if people understood the critical moment that the work of K-3 literacy is in the life of a person, they would be turning all of their attention here. Because we have been failing students for generation after generation, and therefore it's been evidenced in the long-term success of families and communities. So that's what I think now, as I think about that early NIH report that really pointed the finger at mom, I point the finger back at the systems that have underinvested in our communities.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions or comments for Stephen before we move on to our council goals? All right, I have taken the PowerPoint out of the sharing mode and put it into where I can actually work on it. Once again, these were the draft goals that we had created for the June 22-23 school year. Based on what we discussed today, I'm wondering 2 things, and I'm curious what you all are wondering. For this last one, I'm wondering if this should be literacy. And then I'm also wondering if we should change this 2-generational wording to better match the more updated that Stephen was referring to. Any thoughts? And you could just speak out. It's going to be too much for me to like call on people and do this. And so just speak.
This is Lisa. I would agree that reading should be literacy success and that it should be a multi-generational initiative. And we need to consider that beyond mom, way beyond mom. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, big brothers, big sisters are all part of this. My children wouldn't listen to me about reading because they didn't want mom to be their teacher.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Melissa, excuse me, what's that B to 12? Reading
Birth to
success?
12.
Oh,
Birth to
birth.
12.
Okay.
And
I'm
I
used
can,
to
that's
0.
another good
Okay.
point. This was something we were constructing internally. Develop a birth through grade 12. Is there anyone who's opposed to changing the reading to literacy? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Maureen. I saw the thumbs up. That's helpful too. Is there anyone who's opposed to changing this wording to multi-generational success initiative? All right. And oops. Just a note, this keeps getting bigger and bigger every time we meet together. More and more encompassing, but that's so important. So those were just two things that resonated with me as a result of today. Is there anything here that anyone feels needs to be tweaked, edited, added to, adjusted before we do, according to legislation, we have to publish these. So I'd like to put them on the webpage.
In the third bullet, Melissa, you want to change reading to literacy.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
And is one of our other charges to analyze currently used reading programs and make recommendations or something along that line? The whole analyzation that was done in June and July.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, you're asking, do we have a role in supporting districts with the legislative mandates of the new program and curricula? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry.
I was actually thinking that one of our charges was to, come up with the programs that are going to be recommended by the state, or is that a whole separate function?
We could add that. We could actually, so what I wanted to bring up too is we had all looked at a survey that was going to be going out to the districts during the last year around what programs they use. That is going to have to be adjusted because now that so much time has gone by, that districts are actually going to have to be telling us at the state what programs they're going to be using from the approved list. So I'm wondering, instead of analyzing the current landscape, should our goal for this year then be, I need to look at the legislative wording, but something about approving those programs, moving them forward to the approved list. I think, I think that would work. What do you all think?
Just as a addition to that, I can tell you that's what my colleagues are waiting to hear about, as well as curriculum directors, like which of the programs are going to be endorsed and which are not, and which do I need to send in a waiver or whatever the process is going to be. So I think that is one of the big outcomes that my colleagues expected from this group.
Okay. So is there anyone who would be opposed to me changing this goal for the year to review and approve at least 5 reading curriculum models? Because the legislation says Section 395, not later than July 1st, 2022, which we are late. However, the commissioner has appointed me as interim director, so we're able to move forward. The director of the Center for Literacy, so the director of the center, in consultation with the Reading Leadership Implementation Council, you, shall review and approve at least 5 reading curriculum models or programs to be implemented by the local and regional boards of education. So would you like me to change this goal to be that? And I'll write it, and then if you want to tweak it, add words, edit, please tell me. I'm going to write it now.
Melissa,
Yes.
can I talk while you're writing?
Yes, and actually I'm remembering from one of our past conversations, you all didn't like the word models, so I'm just going to say curricula and programs. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that I like having some of these broader goals that kind of guide our work. It might also be helpful to kind of have in the sort of ongoing slides is, you know, a summary of the different parts of the legislation, because I think, you know, I don't think the council's job is to do all of those things, but if the council kind of had a list of, you know, what's, you know, a summary of the different action steps in the legislation that, you know, because I think in some sense, those aren't all our specific goals, but it would be helpful that that's also part of our work, which is to support the center and you fulfill those goals. So it might be helpful to have those summarized in one of, as part of, you know, the center's goals. There could be the center's goals and the council's goals. I don't know if that makes sense or would be helpful or not.
Would that be helpful to people? I could do that for the next meeting.
Yes, I would love to see what the legislation actually says, because, you know, we have down there something about review and approve at least 5 reading curricula. I thought we were an advisory council.
You are an advisory, and you are you advise and consult with the director of the center. So as I'm interim right now, you're consulting and advising me. This is stated, I don't know why it keeps going on. This is stated specifically in the legislation that
we approve,
that you consult in consultation with. So consult with, that's it. Consult, thank you for that. Consult with the director of the Center for Literacy, pardon my edit, if I do typos, research and reading success 2. There we go. That's what it is. You're right, Fran. It's that consultation.
Is it review and approve or review and recommend?
The legislation says review and approve. So I will be bringing forward to you the data that came from the review process, and you will all be reviewing those, and then we'll be moving forward the ones
Can we be, Melissa,
that you've consulted with me on.
Can we be very clear and actually go to the statute itself? Because I want to make sure that we're very clear about who is actually reviewing and approving.
So I can read to you, it says not later than July 1st, the director of the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success, in consultation with the Reading Leadership Implementation Council, shall review and approve. So you all are in consultation.
Okay,
shall
great.
review. Okay.
So then you are to
Yeah,
review.
that's different, Stephen. Thank you. That's different than our approving it. We're in consultation with you, and you approve them.
Right.
Got it.
So last time we met, you gave us a pretty robust status update on your process for review and approval. And I think I think we would benefit, and I think to the point that was made earlier, those who are watching and waiting would benefit to have updates on that review and approval process, so that we know when that ultimate list or lists are going to be released. But also what the updates may be on some of the other parts of this process, the waiver process, other elements that are being developed by your office that I think the audience is waiting with bated breath to see, as you can imagine.
Right. So thank you for that. I'm hoping, I really appreciate how we're talking all of this through and we can be very clear on the goals and the functions. So thank you. So just a very quick update. As you know, that we got 53 submissions. We had 16 people on the review team. Each program curricula that was submitted had at least 2 reviews. Some districts submitted the same program or curricula. Some districts submitted the same as some of the publishing companies submitted, but each submission was given at least 2 reviews. So we are now at the process of, this was just completed, we are now in the process of analyzing these data to be able to put forward. We're auditing the data, the process. I'm working very closely with Ajit Kapala-Christian from our performance office, our chief. So we're working very closely, and the commissioner will be talking to superintendents about it tomorrow on what we're hoping will be the date of moving it forward. So what will happen is I will have a meeting with all of you. You will consult with me as we state here in the goal on the review and approval, and then we can move the programs forward to notify the superintendents and the charter school directors of the Connecticut approved programs. Does that help at all, Stephen? Okay.
So when do you expect that list to be revealed publicly?
Can I wait to have the commissioner talk about that in the memo on Thursday and then tomorrow during her talk to the
Sure.
superintendents?
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so back to the goals. Do you feel that this is more representative of the legislation, the intent, and the actual process? Oh, and actually, this is going to have to be interim. How's that? I could even say,
Melissa, that if I may, I
yes.
think the fact that you're interim is really a ministerial question at this point, because you are the director at this point. And when we have a director that is chosen through a different process, which is not a process that is an interim one, then that director will serve in that function. But I don't think it makes a difference. There isn't a different set of responsibilities for you just because you're interim. So this is should be an evergreen document. So
Thank you.
Completely agree, Stephen.
Any thoughts, questions, tweaks, anything? You know, I'm wide open. This is for all of us. All right. I'm going to count to 10 in my head and then we're moving on. Bye, Lisa. Thank you. Okay. I am going to then move on. I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute so that I can get out of this and into the presentation mode. So I just wanted to recap what we did the last time. There was conversation, there were thoughts, there were questions. So what I did was I wrote down all the questions that you all had, and I organized them by draft titles. So as you recall, at the last meeting, we were talking about developing this reading success strategy. We did the peel the onion protocol, where we were talking about, okay, so what does this exactly mean? What questions does this bring up for us? These were the questions that you all brought forward. I did not attribute names. I just grabbed questions and then I put them here and I tried to organize them by like. Right? So if you could just review this and tell me what you think, and if you think there needs to be any changing, tweaking, if you recognize your words and think maybe I captured them incorrectly. Is there anyone who needs more time to review what's written on the slide? Bye, Margie. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
If you have any thoughts or comments, just feel free to send them in the chat. Ooh, are we over our time? All right. Well, then, the last thing that I want to do, so everyone is set with this then? Okay. The last thing I wanted to share with you were meeting dates. So by going by what we've been doing so far, having the meetings from 1 to 2:30, I just wanted to show you these suggested meeting dates. I deliberately scheduled these in tandem because I know we have a lot coming up, especially around the programs. Then here, I started doing one every other month as dictated in the legislation. However, if we need one, we can put one in there. But I'd love to get these on your calendars. So any thoughts here? And this was included. Leslie did send this to you in your email so you can further review, but we'll invite you to all of these. All right. I see, Mike, you're typing. Whoops. And then as always, if you have questions, you know where to find me. But
yeah,
wow, this was really
I was just typing to say if you could send invites to all of us, that's great. So
yes, absolutely, we will do that. Great, thank you all. All right, any comments, questions before we say goodbye?
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you all, and
Thank you.
Appreciate your consultation as always and your information. All right, see you all
Take
soon.
care.
Thank you. We appreciate you, Melissa, for taking this on as interim director.
Thank you so much
Appreciate you.
for coming today. That shows so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.